A man lived a happy life for 10 years, then woke up and realized he dreamed it all. How can we really tell reality apart from our imagination? How do you know that the life you're living is real? That your wife is really your wife or your child is really alive? You may convince yourself that there's no way it's not real because you can feel it, touch it, and even have memories of it. But one man lived a whole 10 years thinking the same thing until the day something just didn't feel right. He noticed that something was wrong with his lamp and became fixated on it. Suddenly, he was woken up and found himself on the ground with the past 10 years of his life completely erased. He still had the memories of his wife and children, but no proof that they ever existed. This is a true story. The man who goes by the name Tempted to Soon on Reddit kept his name out of the story because he felt it was really personal. He described how about 10 years he met a wonderful young lady. She just made my heart skip and my face red. Just like all love stories go, he attempted to pursue her, but she always seemed to be tied up with a boyfriend who didn't treat her well. I pursued her for months and dispatched a few jerk boyfriends before I finally won her over. The couple dated for 2 years before they got married. Soon into their marriage, they gave birth to a baby girl, and his happiness ever after seemed more possible than ever. The man and his wife lived the life that many wish for. They were happy together, their children were healthy, they were wealthy enough to afford a nice house. I had a great job and my wife didn't have to work outside the house. When my daughter was 2, my wife bore me a son. My son was the joy of my life, and I would walk into his room every morning before I left for work and doted on him and my daughter. For 10 years, the man watched his children grow up as he said good morning to them every day before going to work. He felt their soft skin, heard their innocent laughs, and watched them form their own identities. All seemed well, but as the expression goes, nothing good ever lasts forever. In what seemed like a split moment, everything changed. One day while I was sitting on the couch, I noticed that the perspective of the lamp was odd, like inverted. It was still in 3D, but just wrong. It was a square lamp base with red with gold trim on 4 legs in a white square shade. I was transfixed, I couldn't look away from it. The man couldn't understand why he was so fixated on the lamp. He could have easily brushed it off and gone on with his life, but he just couldn't stop thinking about it. It was like some sort of nature or force was pulling him towards it. I stayed up all night staring at it. The next morning I didn't go to work. Something was just not right about that lamp. The fixation on the lamp kept getting worse until it became a complete obsession that took over the man's life. I stopped eating. I left the couch only to use the bathroom at first. Soon I stopped that too, as I wasn't eating or drinking. At this point, the man's family started to worry about him and didn't know how to help him. I stared at the lamp for 3 days before my wife got really worried. She had someone come over and try to talk to me. However, no amount of talking can break this man's obsession with a lamp. It was pulling all his attention and he felt like it was almost trying to send him a message. However, the wife couldn't put up with it. Just as the wife gave up and left with the kids to stay at her mother's house, everything clicked and the man finally understood. I had my epiphany. The lamp's not real, the house isn't real, my wife, my kids, none of that is real. The last 10 years of my life aren't real. The realization was followed by deep pain, both on an emotional and psychological level. The lamp started to grow wider and deeper. It was still inverted. It took up my entire perspective and all I could see was red. I heard voices, screams, all kinds of weird noises, and I became aware of pain. A ton of pain. The first words I said were, "I'm missing teeth," and opened my eyes. I was laying on my back and on the sidewalk surrounded by people that I didn't know. Lots were freaking out. I was completely confused. Just like that, after 10 years, the man was waking back up for the first time. It turns out that the man was still in his last semester at college, not yet even old enough to have been married or had children. He started to put the pieces of the puzzle together and realized that he'd suffered an injury during a complication with a football player. The man was only 120 pounds while his opponent weighed 325, leaving him unconscious on the ground. The life he lived had happened entirely in his mind. The man couldn't believe it himself. While unconscious on the ground, I lived a different life for a whole 10 years. Sadly, the reality was much worse than the parallel universe he had traveled to while unconscious. He couldn't even fully comprehend what was happening when he was waking back up. He remembers, "At some point a cop scooped me up, dragged/walked me across the sidewalk and grass, and threw me face down in the back of a cop car, and I was still confused. I was taken to the hospital by the cop. It seemed he didn't want to wait for the ambulance to arrive." The man suffered in trying to cope with the fact that the life that made him happy for so long wasn't even real. He longed for it and had no idea if he could ever actually recreate it. I went through about 3 years of horrid depression. I was grieving the loss of my wife and children and dealing with the knowledge that they never existed. I was scared that I was going insane as I would cry myself to sleep, hoping I'd see them in my dreams. One way to explain what happened to this man is the theory of parallel dimensions or alternate reality, and it states that it's possible a hypothetical exists in a self-contained plane of existence coexisting with our own. The sum of all these potential parallel universes would combine into the constructed reality of the multiverse. This would maybe give meaning to the visions the man continues to see. Sometimes I see my son, usually just a glimpse out of my peripheral vision. He's perpetually 5 years old and I can never hear what he says. The existence of parallel worlds would also hold parallel versions of us. Scientists think there could be a copy of all of us in a parallel world. This would be someone who's just like you with the same thoughts and behavior. They would even look like you, but they'll have their own choices and decisions, which would lead them to different lives. One decision they made differently at one point can completely alter their path and give them experiences that you'll never have. The theory also indicates that perhaps when we sleep, the dreams we have are glimpses into the lives of our parallel selves. Something to think about. For now, perhaps the better we know ourselves, the more we can make sure we create the kind of life we hope for in this dream.